Welcome to Go All the Way, a place to celebrate courage, energy, and heart. From possibility to reality, let's look at some of the clues to a life where we go all the way. Here's your host, Kate Lemay, ready to dream big and enjoy the journey with you.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited today to bring to you a very special person in my life. So my first podcast or show was featuring my sister, Micheline Sarah Lemay. And my second one is featuring my brother, Daosith Samuel Lemay. And I'm very grateful. I have an incredibly amazing family. I hope actually to get my mom and dad on here as well. I'm not sure if my other brother and sister would ever do this, but I'm very, very excited to share with you the idea of going all the way in relationship. So my brother is full of incredibly helpful wisdom, and this experience that we're going to enjoy together is no exception. So I will tell you a little, I can't help it, Daos. I got to tell a little bit of a funny story. So long time ago, probably before he had kids, but then was about to have his first daughter, Olivia, which he'll share with you was the reason that he really went into this level of in his life is what I would say, what made him commit and explore in this area of spirituality and growth and development and connection to things far greater than ourselves. And so before my brother had Olivia, I definitely think he thought I was crazy. Like, I think he thought I was weird. And so what I love is that now, like, my brother he did the work. When you hear his story about coming from a refugee camp in Laos to now, being able to financially support his family in a beautiful way. And then the birth of his daughter really cracking him open into this sphere of connection and work that, I would say, is even deeper in this. He's committed to meditation in ways that, same with my sister, Mishi, like, both of them, the way they arrived to where they are and their strength of knowing is through personal work. They showed up, they spent the time with themselves. They felt down to the core. They learned from their own pain in a way that helped them become better to the whole in the community, to their family, to themselves. And it's not fake. They did the work to get to this space where, even though, they would tell you it's not that it's all the time perfect like this, but there's a certain wisdom that comes from knowing in your soul and heart that you've already been in these places and how to help progress. So my style is much more reading a lot of books and taking classes and whatever, many things that are like outside of me. The part that I admire about both of my siblings is their commitment to the self-work and meditation and deeply feeling and being with the feelings that are causing the challenges in their world. So with that, I am so proud and excited to introduce you to my brother, Daosith Lemay, and he's Spiritual Daosith on YouTube, and he does these monthly updates that are actually really cool, that connect with the astrology of our world. And I'm not sure what else he has. Oh, he has a book, Becoming the Creator. So I'll drop the links in this YouTube show for you to check out Daosith's book, Becoming the Creator. It's a gem. You definitely want to get it. It's like I asked him actually to write it. I was like, Daosith, can you write me what you're trying to tell me all these times when he met with me? Oh, my poor brother my brother and sister have held Messy Kate so many times. Anywho, I love my family so much, and I am so glad to share my brother Daosith with you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm very, very excited to introduce my second guest today. So this is definitely a family affair where I roped Mishi into round one, and here we are with my beloved brother Daosith for the second interview. So um, first, I just want to say I do come from a large family. There's 5 kids in the family, and I feel very lucky that my mom and then my sister and my brother and I are all very much on an outward spiritual path. Not only do we do the work with ourselves, but we share out loud. And that, I mean, how lucky to have so many people in our family where like the stuff we're into can be open dialogue and a way to connect. So I am so incredibly proud of my brother, not only for all the work he does for himself, but he has been a true uh, helper to me in my life with a lot of different things and looking at ways at looking at things and helping me feel feelings that I don't want to feel and blah blah blah. But his book, you can see it behind him. It's called Becoming the Creator. It's an awesome book. It has so many practical tips. And so as we're talking today, I just wanted to point that out. There's this like take home resource you can have. We'll make sure to put it in the link. He also has an awesome YouTube channel called Spiritual Daosith, which hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about. But Daos, I would actually like you to introduce yourself. So do you mind taking a shot at just how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Firstly, I don't think you had to twist my arm very much for me to get persuade me to be joining on your podcast. So one, I honor you and the co-creation that we're having at this moment. And like you said, there's no such thing as coincidences in my mind, in the fact that we as a family are just so spiritually willing to work on ourselves and to share our experiences, especially through mom and dad, Lauren and Greg, and the container that they held for us has been just such a um, serendipitous thing for us, and I can't honor that as much and be as grateful as possible for that, as well as being in on my spiritual journey with you and Mishi as well. So it's just a wonderful thing. You know, the way I would say for me is that I'm just a divine being experiencing myself, and through my experiences perhaps helping you reconnect with your own source connection to God, all that there is, source energy. And on my own path is to help you heal and move through your own journey, should you seek that out for yourself. I have many different roles that I play beyond that. But that to me is kind of where my essence, where I feel in my being, is just to be a little bit of a way shower in a sense of my experience for others to find their own path to their own journey or empowerment, whatever it is that you are working on, and their connection to source. I think a little bit of background for your audience, Kate, and for those who listen to this. My background, in a sense, history, and I know a lot of people know this, is that I was born in a refugee camp, right? So I was born in a refugee camp, Yubon, Thailand. My biological parents were fleeing the Laos killing fields, and through that process, I came over to the U.S. and ended up somewhere in New England. And my father was an abusive drunk, and my mother was mentally ill, and um, that left me with a lot of things to unpack in my life, right? So I had to unpack this safety issue. I had to unpack all these traumas, all these things that dealt with my biological parents and my upbringing there, as well as not having anything to our name, because basically I'm fresh off the boat, if you will. Um, from there, going through the foster care program for a couple of years, bouncing around, and then finally coming to the Lemays, and God bless and the Lemays, and for their compassion and love, because they took my brother and I on and gave us a starting foundation for my childhood going forward. But a lot of the things that I had carried over from my biological parents, and that whole process really carried throughout my entire my life. And so in my older years, going through college and coming into a relationship, I was finding the same patterns of anger, of of self-worth, safety, etc., throughout my entire life in all my relationships. And it wasn't when until I got married with my wife, with Jessica, and that I really started seeing a lot of these things coming up again. The things that I was seeing in my childhood, things I was kind of seeing throughout my early adulthood until, in my marriage, were starting to come up again. And it wasn't until my daughter was born that all this stuff came pouring out of me. And it was almost like my higher self coming out and saying, it's time for you to step on your path and to do some inner work. You can no longer avoid these things. And at that moment, when you say when my daughter was born, I would say she was the genesis for a lot of this inner work. But at that moment too, I was working in the financial world. I was making more money than I ever made in my life. I should, by definition, in terms of success, feel like I should have been good, right? I should have been happy. I should have been all these different things. But what I found was I was living really a facade of an empty shell, projecting something out into the world that I wasn't, to avoid feeling all these things that I was carrying over these years. And it wasn't until, obviously, when my daughter was born, then I decided to say, enough is enough. I've been angry, right? Anger was the catalyst for all this stuff. I was angry about all sorts of things, minute things that you as an individual would say, that's absolutely illogical. That's irrational for you to get so angry about. And I talked about this, Kate, the story about the blinds, the blinds in my house. Jessica, we had just bought this house, and Jessica said, I would like to put blinds up in the windows. And I just remember getting absolutely angry. Like, I wasn't good enough. You want more. Like, how could you ask this for me when I just bought this house? Like, just that kind of stuff. I projected it onto myself around self-worth. And that's when I realized there's stuff that needs to be dealt with. And I sought all sorts of people trying to figure things out. And all I kept hearing was, there's healing that needs to be done. There's healing that needs to be done. And in that process, I went into a very, very intense meditative practice where I was meditating in the morning, during the day, and at night. And it got to the point where I was, hours at night meditating, working through, starting from the most recent all the way backwards, from things where my relationship with my daughter and why I was getting so angry about stuff, or what my wife was telling me and why I was getting angry, and the things about the house, all bringing it inward to saying, what was this all about? And finally addressing the emotional component associated with it, to unravel the beliefs that I had projected on all my relationships, and to seek that what was inside me, to understand where this power was coming from, why I was living this life, and to help heal and offer love to myself to shift those patterns out. And through that process, and through my understanding of, as through that process, as well as going through my meditative practice, I then became in contact with some of my spiritual guides, who gave me, I would say, keys to the kingdom, if you will. The notion that we are all creators. We are divine beings given the opportunity to understand ourselves, which is the original desire of Source, to seek to understand itself. And because of that power, because of the same divine Source energy within you, you get to create all that you want, to understand yourself, but it takes a lot of intention and awareness from which we are built in this society and structure to unravel that, to understand where we put our power and our attention to create our lives. And that's basically what I help people do, is help unravel a lot of these things, give them a guidance to understand what's happening and where they're giving their power away, so that they can reclaim it and thus find more peace and joy in their life.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Daos. I wrote, I think that this idea of, source seeks to understand itself, right? So this human condition we have, that is one way to see the world, right? And
Right.
it does help. Like when I think about your second place where you landed around where we put our power and tension and why are we giving our power away? When we think about moments, we understand so deeply, like when we are aligned with that feeling that connects us to all that is, and we feel so good. It's like, it is the best drug there is like connection to source. Like it is like better than a good cup of coffee. It's like a really, really, really beautiful, faithful, held in grace space where you feel that you are right in the world is right with you in it, and all is well. And then there are these other times where there's nothing different except the thing going on in between our ears, where we're like, things are not okay in the world. Or even worse or harder is when it comes out of us and it projects onto these people we love. And we were talking before we started today about what your topic was going to be about, the going all the way. So, and we talked about relationships, and I feel like in the story, in Daosith's story, I'll just in your book, Daos, the stories are fantastic. I just feel like you're so raw and so real. I think most people don't share the details in a way that's like you're truly vulnerable. You're talking about being erratic with your wife and being irrational, and then owning in a way that brings growth. And so, and in that process of your commitment, you ended up being able to, buy things in your home that were desired by your wife and not resent or hate her for that. You were able to be more compassionate with your daughter, and now you have a son. So since you wrote that book, so tell me a little bit, Daos, about first, what do you think it is about the relationship to our core family? So we've got, your spouse and your kids, which are a separate family than the family we're born into, right? Like I always say, it's the family we choose versus the family we get. Although in some ways we choose our spouse and then we get kids, right? Like it's not like anything about who they're going to be. So tell me a little bit about, why do you think these like, what are these for? What are these relationships for?
Right. Okay. So this is a big box to kind of unpack, and I kind of have to like set the foundations before I kind of like go into the whole relationship aspect. Okay. So the way I was presented via my guides was that we have influence over our relationship, over our reality. Right. So we're vibrational beings, and because we are source, we are awarded all that we needed to seek to understand ourselves. Okay. Part of that process is via the law of attraction. We're not going to go into that, but via the law of attraction, because you're a vibrational being, if you can imagine like law of attraction, quantum field, whatever you want to call it, the universe, via the law of attraction, via the quantum field, what you seek to understand about yourself must be experienced on the outside so that you can see it, right? Otherwise, you'll never be able to really truly understand what it is you're holding on to. You must see something on the outside or experience it externally, whatever that means, externally, for you to be able to extrapolate the data to understand how you are projecting that belief into your reality. You are vibrationally allowed to do that. So via the law of attraction, you draw into your relationship vibrationally what you're holding on to. And we are all energetics. If you look down to it, atoms, electrons were just vibrating, and you're just source consciousness and the life substance. You're vibrating out into the universe a frequency which needs to be matched so that you can understand you can understand yourself, right? So how else are you going to be able to understand feast and famine, good and bad, wealthy and poor? You have to kind of see the oppositions of these things so that you can understand what you are holding on to, right? So in that realm of the law of attraction, there is this concept of the law of reflection and the law of mirror, right? What that means is that what you create as the creator, you must see that what you're creating, there's an aspect of you being played out. And because you're part of source, all that there is, everything and anything can be used as a mirror, even down to the smallest pebble or tree. Notice when you walk out in nature and you look at a tree, you can extrapolate so much information from that tree that reflects something about you, like or anybody, right? So this law of attraction and the law of mirror and the law of reflection gives you feedback to help you understand the things that you're holding on to.
Yes. Can you just, sorry, before you go a little further, can you go a little bit deeper on, you're about to say like extrapolating from a tree? Like, can you go there for just a second?
So, okay, so we have to go another level. Everything is being interpreted in your brain. You may have your senses. Everything may seem like it's happening outside of you, but it's being filtered through all your senses, your sense of touch, your smell, your sight, your hearing, your taste, all that externally. Those five senses are very limiting in a sense, but you're experiencing those stimuli and they're coming into your brain, and through all your beliefs, all the things that are happening in your head are filtered out through all that for you then to be able to interpret it. So you are interpreting all the information that's coming through. So when you walk out in nature and you look upon a tree, you could extrapolate things, how you perceive that about yourself. We'll take two different people. You have someone who's negative and then you have someone who's positive, right? You walk out and then someone who's negative look at that tree and say, oh God, look how gross that tree is. It's disgusting. It's all over the place. It's gnarly looking. And from someone in a third party perspective with unbiased view would look at it and say, that person's looking at life very negative. Or you could take a positive approach. Somebody comes, look how beautiful and perfect that tree is. Look how gorgeous it grows and how perfect. You could extrapolate that from a third party perspective with unbiased view and say, look how positive that person is. The same thing could be happening with the law of attraction. That's why you hang out with certain people. You are attracted to certain people versus other people. Successful people hang out with successful people because they want to be more successful, right? Otherwise, if you didn't have the law of attraction, why would you do that? Why would you follow people that you're trying to mimic if there was no cause and effect associated with that, right? So through the law of attraction, the law of mirroring, you have to take it upon yourself as the creator to say, I created this, although it may not seem like that. I created this experience. There's something to be seen. And there, through that awareness, you can extrapolate that data to then say how, to understand your beliefs. That is vitally important and why you need to go all in with your relationships. Your deepest mirrors and that which reflects the core aspects to you and what you are believing and what you hold on to, and all those things that are hidden from you can be mirrored back for you through your relationships. And here's the reason why. Your closest relationships are the ones that you let your guard down with. You don't pretend to be someone else. So when you look at them, and the most potent, powerful times is when you're having the biggest arguments, is when you can extrapolate so much information from that relationship. But it takes so much courage, so much strength, so much energy and awareness for you to be in that place to do that. That's why I say you need to go all in with your relationships, because if you don't do that, you just are scratching the surface and you will scapegoat everything else about yourself onto something else. They don't respect me. They're an asshole. They do all these other things. everything. But you never turn the finger towards you because you didn't honor the relationship further enough to see the mirror of what they present to you. The reason why you're in that relationship is because of the law of attraction. You got into the relationship, although it may have been attraction, it may have been something else like a physical attraction, but there was a vibrational match to which you two connected on to help each other see something about each other. There are other, when I say we are all divine beings, we are all from source. All of us are from source. That person is just is playing their own role as source, seeking to understand themselves. And that's why co-creation is so powerful, because it's hard to see things on your own. It's so much more powerful to have someone else play that role for you, right? Co-parenting, a child, someone who betrays you, someone who doesn't appreciate you, someone who has more wealth than you, whatever. They play a significant, powerful role for you to see something about yourself, to help you unwind things, to understand your beliefs and what you're holding on to. That's why you need to go all in with your relationships. And the law of attraction, the law of mirror in the relationships is one of the most powerful tool for you to be able to do that. When I think about my relationships with my wife and my child, you know, we just talked about this too, Kate. Like, I realize when I get into, for instance, we'll just get raw about this. When my daughter has an emotional breakdown, and it's usually later in the day, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we call it the witching hour, and she's emotional and she wants attention and she wants love, she acts out really big and starts crying, and she's emotionally all over the place, as a 6-year-old should be. Yet something inside me just goes bonkers. I get triggered and I come in and I'm like, that's enough. You need to calm down. You need to act this certain way, right? For me to feel good, right? And then it explodes into a whole control, fight, power, self-worth, love thing. And it becomes a whole mess. It isn't until I actually sat down with that and said, why do I need to go in and try to control her? Why am I getting angry? Why am I feeling this sense of safety issue and wanting to exert my power into it? And it's all because of my childhood. I had to, I was beat for my emotions. I wasn't allowed to have emotions. I want to feel safe. And so I want to control my environment. And because of that awareness now, I can now approach my relationship with my daughter in a much different fashion that holds more love and compassion compared to fear and anger, etc., that drives my decision in our relationship in a different direction with more peace, joy, and happiness, all while honoring both of us, which then gets reflected back to me more my love and compassion for myself rather than the opposite.
So so next time this comes up, like say it comes up tonight, right? How do you catch yourself in the middle? Like, what's the, like, do you use trigger? Like, tell me a little bit about what are you doing?
Right. This is a practice, and I've said this in my book, like, you've been conditioned. So I'm 40 plus. I like to say I'm ageless, but I'm 40 plus here.
Still younger than me. Still younger than me.
Yeah. But your mental structure has been crystallized in aversion. You've been crystallized in the way of how you think, how you act, how you behave emotionally, etc. So you have this, even your brain synapses is crystallized, right? So what it takes, and you have to also think about this statement, is that all your best decision making has gotten you here. So if you aren't happy with where you are, you need to change the way you think, right? So the only way for you to change the way you think is, one, to become aware of it. And that requires practice to break the crystalline structure within you. That's why they say, how long does it take to build a habit, Kate? 21 days?
It's so many different versions, but 21, 30, whatever.
It takes time, right?
Yeah.
So it's a practice. And the practice of awareness requires everything I've outlined in my book was going through all these things to help you uncover these things so that you can unbox them and restructure them. And then what needs to happen is your awareness. So I've done this for a long time, and I'm aware of myself. Not to say I'm perfect. I go through the same struggles. Is that when that time comes, I'm fully aware of what's happening. And I'm like, okay, I'm aware of what's coming up. I'm aware of what's happening with my body. I'm aware of what's happening with my emotions. And to see my daughter as another divine being like myself and to offer a different choice than what I have normally would do on autopilot. Because when you go into trigger mode and your kids are screaming or your wife is doing this or that, you're crystalline in your way you behave and the energetics and the patterns you have, then you just go into autopilot. Like my daughter decides to break my son's train set because she's angry, right? That initial reaction is where you have to really bring awareness in that moment, in that now, to saying, aha, I see what's happening. And you have your choice of saying, do I go in autopilot and do what I normally would have done, which is create a hornet's nest of stuff because of my own stuff that I'm projecting into it, or have my awareness and know what's feeling, what I'm feeling. How can I offer a different space of love for her where then I can see her and say, she needs attention. She just needs love and to be in a different space, right?
I find too that like where I get stuck a lot is when I don't have a lot of time. So say I have to get out the door and something's happening, I don't do as well because I'm like feeling that pressure. Like I'll just use like, say you have to catch a plane or like, you know, something that no one's going to wait for, right? And granted, I know that like a meeting at work is not a plane, right? Like, so there's this reality of like, I could be even more present with my family when this stuff is happening and say, listen, you know what? The people on the meeting can wait, but I feel a certain level of integrity about trying to show up in time, which then prevents me from having. So how do you do that? Like, do you have any advice on like bookmarking so that to say like, listen, I honor what is happening right now. However, I cannot do this in this moment.
Yeah.
What do we do?
So one of those things, we are human. It's just part of life. And time, obviously, whatever that construct is, makes it limiting us to be able to just say, like, in the moment, do all the work. There are two aspects I would say that's playing out when we go into those kind of situations. One is your attachment to what you believe time is and what you hold as needing to be on time. And then the other part of this is dealing with the emotional component that comes up. Okay, so there's two things that need to be unboxed here. One is to say the emotional component. You can bookmark and say, aha, I feel what's coming up for both you and I. And just to still honor them. I honor what you're going through. I see what's happening, but I can't address this at the moment. But I promise you, I'll get to that. So you imagine talking to yourself as a little kid or whatever. It's just like you're talking to yourself. I honor you. I love you. I just don't have the space right now, but I promise I'll get it to you later, right? You can do whatever version of that. And then you just bookmark it for later to have that unboxed later. But you have to do that. The other part that you need to unbox is what is your attachment associated with your belief around being on time? And what's that mean for you? Right? So you can see it's all coming into you. And this experience is coming up for you to unbox it because you have put a belief system in where those two things are coming into your experience to say, well, Kate, what is it that you are holding on to and why do you believe this? What emotion is being brought up? What is it about this piece that's being brought up about time and about work, whatever? It's all being brought up for a reason. You don't have to do it there. Yes, we have time, but I assure you, and I've done that via the law of attraction, via the way that I believe and everything, is that when you unbox it, when you really look at it and you heal what it is that's coming up and you let go of attachments. This kind of stuff doesn't need to be so, I wouldn't say palpable.
Charged. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be. So there's an emotional charge that's built in, and there's a mental charge that's built into it. And when you look at it, you can unbox it, and it next time it comes up, you're like, okay, it doesn't need to magnetize or be magnified or brought in via the law of attraction for you to experience it at that level. It takes practice. You'll go through it a couple times, but I'll tell you, I've gone through it, and it doesn't need to be as palpable. I'll give you, for instance, like anytime in the past, I had to talk about my childhood, I would cry. Couldn't get a word out. I just bawling my eyes out. I could not go 5 seconds without bawling my eyes out. The more times I continued to look at that, the more times I looked at that relationship with my mother and my father and all the things that happened, and looking at myself and going through what you quote unquote shadow work to heal myself and to offer love, the less it became a charge. Now I'm able to openly talk about it without having it be like an emotional breakdown, right? And so you'll go through that, and it will shift as you yourself break your crystalline pattern around and become more aware of yourself as you go along, that these experiences don't necessarily have to be the same thing over and over, reflecting the same thing again and again and again at that level. You're always going to revisit certain things, but it's like a spiral. I always said this, is that your life is like a circle, but on a 3D level, it's like a spiral. You're going to see the same thing again, but at a different perspective, at a different level, because what you're holding on to, Kate, and everybody out there, is your pattern. The thing that you have has worked itself out in all parts of your life. That's why you're going to revisit it over and over and over.
Right.
And it's going to happen more or less in your relationships, your friendships, your family, your work relationships,
close relationships.
Close relationship, but it can also be extrapolated from the collective, from strangers, from what's happening in the news. I guarantee you, if you're politically charged, and we'll just talk about politics real quick, just to talk about, if you're politically charged, if you look at what's happening there, I guarantee you that same thing is playing out in all other aspects of your life, in the relationships. But because it's not your closest relationship and you don't let your guard down, you don't bring it in. But it's happening in your close relationships. And if you could see it, you'd be like, oh my God, it's happening financially. It's happening when you look at your body. It's all these levels, because source wants to seek to understand itself. So it plays out in all aspects of your life, in your projection of what you see, so that you can understand yourself. And that's why you need to go all in with your relationships.
Okay, so here's my doozy of a question, Daos.
Okay.
Why does this matter?
In the end, okay, so I don't know the answer for you. I know the answer for me.
Okay, for you. Why does it matter for you?
It matters because we are source being. We are the desire of source to understand itself. So it matters because we need to understand who we are, what we are, why we are here. And that's why you seek to understand all these different things. It matters because, do you want to live your life in a way of complete, let's say, like the way I live, victim-based mentality, surviving versus thriving, like all these different things? No, you don't want to live. You realize as a creator, that doesn't resonate with me. I don't want to do that anymore. So it matters for you to say, what is it I'm holding on to? What is it that I believe? And then shift that around so that you can find those things in your life now and build upon that going forward. That's not to say that certain beings, we have other aspects to us. We are whole and part of everything. So although we feel fragmented, there are aspects of us that go along. There are parts of you, higher aspects of you, that choose to experience certain things. It's just the way that is. That doesn't mean you're a victim. It just means that you were part of it and you forgot some of that. And so you may have chosen a life that may have some hardships that you need to go through, because your soul, your source being wanted to experience it, to understand itself. So you may have heartache in your life. You may have all these trials and tribulations. The thing is, like, what is a life that's just pure joy? It's just a flat line. There's no ups or downs. So for you to really understand yourself, you need the ups and downs. You need the contrast, all these different things. And I'll tell you, the biggest changes that came from for me was when I went through all the ups and downs. When I was really down, is when you really was the catalyst. What do they say? The need for change happens when the discomfort of where you are, right?
is more uncomfortable than staying the same, right?
Yeah, whatever.
So,
I screwed that whole quote up.
Yeah, no, you did great. But I do think, like what you're talking about at your core, Daos, is change management in like a businessy talky way, right? Like change management. And the thing is that, what's sitting behind you is a book called Becoming the Creator, right? And I think that, that's kind of a doozy of a question. Like, why is this important? Because essentially then you'd be like, what's the meaning of life and the purpose of our existence? And you've said it many, many times. It's for source to feel and know itself. It's for us to be, and I think we don't know, like, the biggest questions in the world, like, I don't care who you are, we are inventing things that we think. However, we absolutely know in our hearts when we are walking in alignment and things feel in flow, and where we are walking in friction and we feel hard.
Yeah.
And
I'll say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You could talk about when you feel connected is when you feel love, right? Remember, when I look at this, is when you are made of love. You are source. Everything is source. So you are made of love. And when you are feeling connected to your purpose and to life, whatever, you are in love, right? And that's why it feels good. It's when you feel separate, disconnected.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Right. That's when it gets hard, because now you're saying I am outside of something, right? And it's only when you decide to connect with something that you reject that you start to fly and flow again. That's why I say when you look at your relationships, you'll find that where you struggle the most is where you try to disconnect, where you try to say, I reject this, and it's not part of me. But what requires is,
like, even the bad stuff. It's like, sorry, the parts where we're like, when we are angry, when we are frustrated, when we are those things, that we start to reject it as like not part of us, whereas they're all part of us. We need all of these things for a reason. Like, you are a survivor, Daos. Like, think about what you went through as a small child. When you hear rags to riches stories, like, you are totally that story. You are living, breathing from nothing to, you have manifested living in a beautiful home with a beautiful family. And it has its challenges, but it is also like your pride and joy, and I don't think it's fake how committed you are to looking at every opportunity that presents itself and saying, what is this teaching me now? What do I need to feel that I'm not feeling? What do I need to honor that I'm not honoring? How do I use this catalyst? Because think about, truly, when you hear people talk about like those depth of despair moments, the ones where they're on the floor sobbing their eyes out, or in the woods sobbing their eyes out, and they get this clarity because they feel they've given up everything, they've surrendered, and they recognize that, like, I need help. And the place they get it is that connection to source. And that is the thing that carries them through. And I think when we don't feel that, it can get really dark and it can get really scary. I mean, as a person who, I've definitely gone through stuff like that, and yet I wouldn't trade it, because I understand now of, almost a spectrum of feeling that is like so much bigger than I could have ever expected. And my gratitude for the capacity to feel that spectrum, like, that is life. Like, and not to run away from it. You know, I think the hardest hardships come when something happens to people we love, you know, or to our health, or to, you know, to these components that rock us to our core. And in those spaces, it's like, where do we go to get this courage, strength, and heart to continue to go all the way, to continue to love as deep as we, because it's scary. Like, I remember when I gave birth to my first son, I was like, yay, a baby. And the second that happened, I was like, oh my God, it's gonna die. Like, married, you know what I mean? Like, and I was so afraid of heartbreak, you know, just in because I couldn't believe how much love opened up with that being, you know. It was like, it totally expanded my range of emotion. So I love this, Daos. If you had to leave us with one parting advice for when it's hard, for when we're in the dip, you know, for the next time you're in your own dip, imagine this is for you, you know, you're in a dip and you're like, whoa, jelly. Like, what is something we can hold on to? What's a tip you have, or a feeling you can feel?
The idea of becoming the creator, all right, is the understanding. It's a paradigm shift, okay? And that means that you create 100% of the time all that you're doing, okay? That's 100% of the time. Even when you're doing nothing, you are creating something. You're creating nothing. Or let's say you're lazy, being on the couch, right? You are creating being on the couch and being lazy. That is an experience. So don't discount your power. All right, that's key associated with what I want to talk about next. Becoming a creator is understanding that, and you can live a life of victimhood like I did, which says that I was a person who was painting on a canvas, control of the paintbrush, and control of how I was moving it, and then I make a mistake and then blaming someone else for that. How can you blame somebody else for your own painting that you're in control of? And so when you look at your life, the things that are occurring, the synchronicities, the way people look at it is the good things that we've happened in our life, we take ownership for. Bad things that happen in our life, we don't take ownership for. It doesn't work that way. You got to be able to take ownership for both things and have accountability around it. And around that aspect, that when you come across your life and you come through some other experience that's happening and you go into the old pattern that happens, I want you to remember something, is forgiveness. You need to be able to say, forgive yourself for the faults, the things that have happened, the things that you've done, and to be able to move on. But the only way you be able to find forgiveness, people say this, you can either find it, most people try to say they find it at the end. I think there's a different way you can find forgiveness. You know, I lived a life of very much a victim-based mentality. The easiest and most direct way to step out of victim-based mentality is to becoming the creator, saying that I now see myself as someone who helped create the situation through co-creation, and why I magnetize it via the law of attraction, and I see the mirror. In that moment, when you see yourself as a creator, you can offer forgiveness for yourself, for creating it, and also the counterparty, and release them from that energy. To find forgiveness is to allow yourself to flow with grace. You're gonna mess up, you're gonna screw up, but you can find forgiveness when you become the creator, understand why you played a role, why that other person played the role, and to flow by saying, I forgive both myself and the other person, and be grateful for that experience so that you know something about yourself and you are aware of it moving forward. In this time, where we are in these days, especially with your relationships, forgiveness is going to be critical for you going forward. You need to find forgiveness for the things that people have done, because you're keeping yourself in a time loop, a same pattern over and over and over. And that's truly important for yourself. Be kind to yourself and offer forgiveness, whether it's through someone else's experience or becoming the creator and understanding how you play part of it. Give yourself forgiveness and love yourself. That's a much different space of creation than holding on to something, beating yourself up about it, and then creating from that. You're creating from fear or love. Which way do you want to go about doing it? Forgiveness is going to offer you that grace to move towards love and to create more experiences with that energy versus holding on to something that you're beating yourself up about. What you're only going to do is law of attraction, manifest, and see more of that in your reality. So I say, utilize the becoming the creator aspect, know that you're 100% accountable for all of these things, and then find forgiveness for yourself for your faults. Because in the end, you're source and you're perfect, no matter what. But you're just going through this little experience because you're seeking to understand yourself. It brings up this thing where a lot of people who are who have near-death life experiences. I think Natalie Sudman was one of those people. She wrote a great book, and how what happened is when she came out of her body, she went back up and she found this space where she was connected with source, and all they were doing was, she was in the army, I believe, or something, and it was like a roadside bomb, and she left her body, and she came with all these angel beings. It was source, and they were literally talking about what was going to happen after and how they were laughing. They were saying, "Oh, this is going to be fun to experience," and all these different things. And then she came out of that and came back to her body and lived, and she remembered this whole thing. My point being is that these near-death life experiences, everyone talks about going back and how they chose this life beforehand to experience something, and that this is temporary. And then if you can find your connection with who you are and what you're doing, you can find more peace, and to know that you'll go back to source and you're going to be filled with love and acceptance all over again. And I think that's, in the end, we're all looking for that, but it to me comes with becoming the creator and finding forgiveness.
I think I'm going to have you on again, Daos. I
Is
could
there
talk forever. I got a million
could.
questions. So Daos, we're going to hopefully see you at one of the retreats this year. This is my goal. You said June, but I got to talk to my colleagues about June, because that one I partner with Lonnie and Christina, and I just have to see where we're at on what they want to do and whatever. So, but I would really like to see you at one of these retreats and be able to advertise that you're going to be there so people can meet you in person. And we'll put the link to your book. It's a great way to access my brother. Like, he spent all this time like writing down what he's talking about in a very tactical way. It is a very, very helpful tool. I read it from cover to cover. I mean, there was a lot of parts that I personally was very emotional reading it, because I am your sister. So I felt super connected to like, just some of the stories in it are so hard to read, in the sense that I'm like, it's hard to see suffering in people you love. So I knew you growing up as a child, and I connect with those times that I was like, woof, that's a heavy one. But I couldn't be more proud of you, Daos. And I'm so incredibly grateful for all the help that you've always given me as I navigate. I feel like this recent thing I'm doing, where I committed and chose to launch 7 retreats, I'm full of like every other day going, what am I doing? But I do think that that was a pull. It was a call. I heard it in a way that it's like, I'm trying to honor something that I understand, but then it keeps showing me opportunities to honor something new, and then honor something new, and honor every freaking day. And I'm like, oh yeah, but you chose this. You wanted it. Like, I wanted this growth. I wanted this connection to know and feel these things. And that does help me a lot. Like, when I am like, oh, I'm like, no, like, what are we seeing here? What's going on? Because I do get it, especially when it's a self-chosen thing versus like when you feel like something's being imposed upon you. But so anyways, thanks for showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, real quickly too, is you are exactly where you need to be to understand something about yourself, right? It's just that sometimes we don't have the wisdom quite yet to understand the lesson, but we're going through that process. And in relationship to what you're doing, in relationship to also like when I wrote my book, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I should be writing a book, but it was just the action of doing it as it unfolded. And I had, in the lessons that came through it, was only as I was going through it. And I wasn't aware of what I needed to know until I actually went through these things. So as you go through your process too, you'll become aware, as long as you'll allow yourself to become aware of what you're learning or what you're getting through that, and the wisdom will come through it. And it's just at that moment, the uncertainty, you are exactly where you need to be for where you need to be. And there's so much truth to that. And so when you get to it, you'll say, oh, that's why that happened, etc. Just unbox the things that are coming up as you go along, and you'll see it unfold and change a little bit.
I love that, Daos. All right. Well, we'll have you back on soon. And
all right.
I love you very much.
I love you too. Thank you, Kate. And I honor everything about you. I think you're an awesome light in this world. And for anybody listening, watching this, totally go check out her retreats. They're powerful, they're moving, and they're exactly what you need if you are feeling called towards it. I guarantee you there's no better way to honor and to love and connect with yourself and source and other like-minded people than to check out Kate's 7 retreat workouts. I think they're going to be perfect for a lot of you.
Thanks, Daos. I definitely think if you've gotten all the way here, it might be a good idea to check it out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for listening. We hope this chat inspired you today. Let us know what resonated with you. Email kate@katelemay.com. Want more? Consider joining us on the road this year at the Dream Big and Enjoy the Journey Tour. Details can be found at www.katelemay.com. That's Kate, Lemay.com.